to
This
generate my.
conference will now be recorded.
Oh, okay. Anything here with the sort of blurred out spaces is going to be our lab space. You'll notice that there are doorways to each of these. All of these entrances are going to be tap access only. So nobody that doesn't have the appropriate training, which is done by myself. So we go through the very standard bloodborne pathogens, chemical hygiene, how to work in a lab. We talk about fire code, tons of different things that are really important for scientists to be able to actually enter that space. They actually do not have tap access to that space if they are not trained there. So they actually are either escorted within the 10-day time period or fully escorted by lab staff by the entirety of the time that they're in there. Say if we have somebody that's like servicing equipment, these doors are always closed. They're never accessible by the public. This is also for the floor above. So this is also on the ninth floor. It's the same exact thing. So these BL2 plus spaces are never going to be accessible by the public or somebody that shouldn't be there. And we have actually added even more tap access points to the lab space since we even last talked, just to make sure that we keep everything as safe as possible for everybody. So that means even small alleyways that would have never come into contact with biological material or chemical material are still being locked as a safety precaution. So even in some places, we actually have 2 to 3 tap points for somebody to be able to enter here. So I don't know if well, I guess you said wait for questions until after that, but we have taken precautions that, for entry into that lab space. So you would enter through a front door, for example. There is a lab coat rack there for you with a line, a delineation, a demarcation, if you will, of where to put on that PPE. All that PPE is available: glasses, gloves, lab coats. They are required to put on all of their safety equipment. Then they can enter that lab space. For the BL2 plus spaces, they actually have additional PPE that they will put on, and those are available in the labs themselves. So in the TC rooms that are BL2 plus themselves, and all items that are used in those rooms are discarded in those rooms. So we shouldn't have gloves that are, that somebody has been working with lentivirus and then they go out into the gem lab space. That should be exclusively and solely used in those TC lab rooms. Those are outlined in different SOPs that we've established in our safety training. I walk through every single week and I talk with researchers. We also establish that there as well. I believe that, Colin, do you want me to address the fire thing or no on top of that?
Uh, if you could, Shane, that would be great. Captain Nodding and Chief Hallahan are here as well, so they'd be happy to hear that and ask questions for
Absolutely.
follow-up.
Yeah, absolutely. So just to go further, so like I said, I walk through the space weekly and I check for differing, fire code issues or anything that I might deem, non-compliant with EHS. So I'm looking for egress. I'm making sure that, 2 feet from the ceiling. I'm making sure that there's 18 inches from the sprinkler heads. All of their safety equipment isn't blocked. Their electrical boxes are not blocked. So this is something that I go through in detail each week with lab ops themselves, and I make that known. And then if there is any issue, say for example, I noticed that egress wasn't 3 feet or whatever has been established by the building, we'll rectify that immediately. We'll move equipment, we'll put it elsewhere. We also, we review fire code and our MAQs to make sure that we're in allotment with any, flammable storage allotments, corrosive storage allotments, toxin allotments, things of that nature. And we do chemical inventories several times throughout the year to make sure that we're compliant with that. We are actually going to be doing that here in the next month again as well to make sure that we're doing that. And I check all of the cabinets, all of their spaces, just to make sure that we're not going over anything that we should be. So again, we do weekly checks, including satellite accumulation areas. We do a weekly check as well for the main accumulation area. Realistically, we do more than one. But at the very, very, very minimum, we at least do one a week. And then, of course, those very extensive walkthroughs, like I talked about.
Hey, this is Deputy Chief Hallinan. I was just curious, where is that documentation kept with your chemicals that you're listing?
So we have them on my internal server, and then we're also uploading. We have them uploaded to generate internal SharePoint files. I have them on my internal site and on their internal site as well.
Okay, that's great. One other thing, you said for the enhanced 2, what's the additional PPE that you would use?
So we use additional glove support. So one of the things that we'll do when we're working with chemicals of any sort is we'll do an assessment on whether or not the gloves, for example, is what I'll use right now, whether or not that is a reasonable PPE for the area that we're in. So for example, if they're using dimethyl sulfoxide, right, we wouldn't use nitrile gloves. We would instead use neoprene. We have Tyvek sleeves that people can utilize as well. All of the viral work is specifically marked in specific incubators and specific biosafety cabinets. We have risk assessments that we have performed where we also detail how they should be working with those organisms, and they are set in specific areas so that we can make sure that we have proper containment at all times. Of course, also with the BL2 plus spaces, the doors are never left open. They're always completely closed. And then, of course, there's the air pressure into the room to make sure that any particles are not flying out.
I'm sorry, but I'm a little ignorant about, is it just bench, there's no bench work done in those areas, or is it just end of hood work? Or?
So yeah, all the work that is done at Generate that's at a BL2 plus is going to be inside of a hood at all times. There should be very,
All right,
very, very little bench work that's done at those levels.
great, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Shane. Does anyone else have any questions? Feel free to raise your hand or send it in the chat, um, and we'll be sure to answer those questions. Give it a couple minutes here. But Shane, is anyone else from your team, able to speak to any of the additional safety precautions or explain the work that's being done in BSL2 for public consumption, of course? Would anyone else be able to speak to that?
Yeah, so we have Greg Kuzma who could speak on like lab ops on that side of things, and then we also have Robin again, who is a scientist that if you would like can sort of speak in more detail about individual biological processes. So depending on who you would like to, what side you would like to see, we have both available to you.
Could I get a brief summary from both? Would that be possible?
Absolutely, yeah, sure.
Go ahead, Roger.
Greg, I can go first. So, there's a lot of different work going on at Generate, but very broadly, the work that's done in BSL2 labs can be kind of broken into using BSL2 cell lines for making proteins or using BSL2 cell lines for assaying specific properties of those proteins. Typically, this is done at very small scale, no larger than 1 mil or even a couple microliters, and it's always contained within these biosafety cabinets.
Okay, I can go into some of the isolation. A couple of
Great.
things to note about our lab space that we have. We're on the 8th and 9th floor. The entrance into the building is all card access controlled with security at the front desk. You can't even access our floor unless you're an employee of Generate. So no one's getting up there that doesn't belong up there or is a guest of the company. The lab spaces themselves, as Shane has said, are card accessed. So again, you have to have the appropriate level of authority to get into the lab spaces. The BSL2 areas are, we have a lot of precautions built in. Most of them are biosafety cabinets in there, minimal bench work done. We have hands-free doors, so we try to control possible contamination by contact, things like that. We have, depending on the type of work that's being done, we have different biological waste streams that we generate with different ways of getting them out of the building. We also have a sort of a daily walkthrough by our lab services to take biological waste out of the building and sequester it. So we're never building up a huge quantity of biohazard in the building. So we're trying to be very cognizant of that. Before we do any BSL work in the laboratory, we actually do a risk assessment. So we look at, all right, what's the agent we're working with? What are the risks associated with it? How much of it will we have on site? What sort of controls we require for it? What the waste stream is, and how do we control for that? Aerosol points. So we try to look at exposure routes. And so in general, we try to do a pretty thorough survey of what we're dealing with to limit any sort of hazard that we have. In addition, if we do have a new hazard that's brought in, We do train the people up that are working immediately with that compound. And then later on in the year, we'll incorporate that into our company-wide safety training for the lab. So, not only is it the people that are working with the compound, but everyone in the lab has some cognizant knowledge of what the hazards are, and respect it. Okay.
Excellent. Thank you both for that summary. That was extremely enlightening, I think, for everyone. So I don't see any questions in the chat. I would like to thank Generate and the representatives for their time. Let's move on to the next presentation group. So tonight we have Sonia Butler and Giles Butchwalter representing. Oh, apologies. Sorry, I skipped. Sorry. We're going to have Ultragenics presenting their proposed operation at 100 Chestnut Street. Alexa Balbo, if you're here, I'll add you as a presenter.
Yes, thanks, Colin. I'm here.
Excellent.
Good
And
evening.
yep, you're a presenter. The floor is yours.
Choose. Okay, I'm getting a little message here that, okay, there we go. I am not a technology wizard. I'll hand this over to Anna.
Thank you, Alexa. Good evening, everyone. I'm Anna. I'm scientist at Ultragenics. I will kick us off with our presentation, and then I will pass the slides on to Alexa, and Alexa will continue on. But to get us started, Alexa, could you please go to the next slide? This is our agenda for today. So first, I would like to introduce everyone, our IBC members. After that, I would like to give you a brief company overview of Ultragenics, who we are and what we do. After that, we have laboratory safety review and protocol risk assessments. And at the end, we would like to save some time for discussion and questions if anyone have any. Please go to the next slide. So introduce our IBC leadership. I'm Anna Ponomarenko. I am a scientist and biosafety officer currently in Cambridge, moving on to Somerville really soon. Also at Ultragenics, we have chemical hygiene officer, Lena Song. Our leadership representatives, and they're both on the call today, are Matthew Fuller, our executive director of factory engineering, and Alex Eastham, who is senior manager in our cell line development. Our HS representatives are Alexa Balbo, J.M. Cloninger, and Kirsten Dinda. I believe they're all also on the call. We have our additional consultants, Brendan Linz and Ryan Petuch, and our community representatives are Nathaniel Schonheimer and Julian Farland. And I apologize if I mispronounced somebody's name. My apologies. Please go to the next slide. So to reinstate our IBC goals, the goals are to protect our employees, to protect the community, and protect the environment from hazardous or infectious material release that we work with, and do it in a way that promotes our science and innovation. So to put it very short, we're committed to moving science forward, but doing it safely. And this is what we're hoping to achieve. Go to the next slide, please. So I would like to give you a brief company overview so you would know who we are, what we are, and what we do. So Ultragenics as a company is committed to delivering treatment to patients with rare and ultra-rare diseases. And we're a company of more than 1,000 employees who are operating in 13 different countries. We have 4 already approved treatments for 5 different diseases, and we have a lot more in the pipeline, including a few in both late and earlier clinical trials for gene therapy. And we have multiple countries, multiple patients that we are able to reach with our therapeutics. Go to the next slide, please. So we have multiple research facilities in Massachusetts. Currently, we are at 840 Memorial Drive in Cambridge, moving really soon into 100 Chestnut Street in Somerville. But we also have 2 locations in Woburn, and we have recently formally opened a manufacturing plant in Bedford, Massachusetts. And I would like to highlight here, we do have multiple locations in Massachusetts, and UTC Research, which is us in Cambridge, moving on to Somerville, we operate on the smallest scale of all of these locations possible. Since we are doing research and our work is usually the smallest scale to advance science for our patients, that we could move on further in our pipeline. Next slide, please. So here's a map of our lab research facility in Somerville, where we are moving into really soon. And it is going to be about 10,000 square feet space at 100 Chestnut Street in Somerville on 2nd floor. All of our lab spaces are going to be designated as Biosafety Level 2. And here in this layout, you can see there are 4 locations with blue lock icons. Those are access points to the lab. And to go through those access points, badge access is required, and employees get access to the lab only after successful completion of all of our safety training performed by our EHS team. And we also have a designated biohazardous waste storage room indicated here with a biohazard sign. So this will be our new lab space with both a fair amount of bench space as well as tissue culture space. And to reiterate, everything will be designated as Biosafety Level 2. Next slide, please. And finally, I wanted to give you a little bit of a very brief overview of what we do at Ultragenyx Gene Therapy Research and what we work with. So our technology in gene therapy is adeno-associated virus, or AAV to put it short. AAV virus is not known to cause disease in humans, so it is a risk group 1 virus. We reduce risk even further because we remove all of the viral genes from AAV to generate our therapeutic AAV vectors for treating genetic diseases. And in addition, we also work with adenovirus that causes disease, the common cold, which is a risk group level 2 virus, and we use it to produce our AAV gene therapy. And because adenovirus is risk group 2, and we do have extensive work with it, we designated the whole lab area as biosafety level 2, which is sufficient for adenovirus. And just to finish off, the AAV gene therapy is, even though it is fairly new, there have already been hundreds of human subjects who were treated with AAV vectors by multiple routes of administration. And this is the research direction that we are pursuing. In Somerville location, we are going to be focusing on research to advance the science so that we could improve and deliver therapeutics to our patients. And with that, I would like to pass on to Alexa so she could go over our laboratory safety review.
Thanks, Anna. I'm actually going to introduce JM, John Morrow Gloninger, who is our EHS consultant, has put in a lot of work into this MOVE project. So introducing JM.
Thank you, Alexa. As Alexa mentioned, I'm part of the EHS team at Ultragenyx, and so I'm going to take us through a couple of the safety procedures we have in place that we'll be implementing at 100 Chestnut. Next slide. So EHS publishes many documents reviewing several different plans. As you can see here, we have plans for the safe handling of biohazardous material, chemical hazardous material, waste management, etc. And all of these plans are published for the entire company on a shared platform called Viva, where everyone can access and read all of our EHS plans. Many of these have been submitted actually as attachments to fulfill different requirements of the permit, so you may be familiar with some of these. But this is an exhaustive list of our what we call our virtual EHS binder. Next slide, please. And so what those documents will cover is basically everything that is outlined in the regulations by the NIH, by the Somerville Biosafety Committee and their ordinance, for example, as well as OSHA and the Massachusetts state regulations as well, and the BMBL. Next slide, please. So all the labs, as Anna mentioned, are BSL2 due to the research we use with AAV and AD5. And because of that, we will have all our labs containing sinks for hand washing, eye wash stations, and safety showers, impervious bench tops, a very easy to clean / decontaminate area, waste collection, decontamination of biohazardous liquids, for example, as well, and self-closing doors. All the tissue culture rooms are going to be equipped with biosafety cabinets for primary containment of any risk group 2 agents. And the airflow to the main lab space is negative, so that all the airflow will not go into any office spaces or shared hallways. Additionally, all the rooms have signs that we have an example of on the right side of this slide, where all the risks and hazards present in a lab will be clearly outlined before entering. Next slide, please. In order to gain badge access, as Anna mentioned earlier, into the BSL lab spaces, apart from the typical training that every employee will get when onboarded, there will also be an additional curriculum for employees who are designated to need lab access. And this will include a general EHS safety training that will cover biosafety, chemical safety, PPE requirements, emergency procedures. We also have a separate bloodborne pathogen training, a Hep B vaccination waiver or providing it to someone upon request as well. And PPE will be provided in the 2 entry points to the labs. There are 4 entry points, 2 of which will be entry points for lab users. The other 2 are a shipping and receiving room, and then we also have a mechanical room. The main entrances will have vestibules for gowning, where all the PPE that is required to enter into the labs will be stocked there. And once in the labs, the use of primary containment like BSCs will be required for any type of risk group 2 handling that will be done. And biological spill and exposure incidence policies are also in place and followed rigorously. We use a software called EHS Insight in order to perform not only risk assessments, but also incident reviews after a spill occurs. And it allows us to conduct an investigation and neatly compile all of our findings in one area. Next slide, please. The handling of biological waste and the disposal of biological waste is contracted out to Triumvirate Environmental. We have a specialist who is on site every day of the week who goes through the labs and empties any full containers and as well manages the shipment and disposal of the biological waste. So solid biological waste is contained in the furthest left and the furthest right images down at the bottom of your screen. And that will be contaminated debris, gloves, non-sharps essentially. Whereas sharps will be contained in those inner 2 photos at the bottom. Those are sharp approved containers. And ultimately this bio waste will get recycled and turned into plastic lumber, which is one way that we try and be more sustainable as well too. Liquid biological waste is disinfected with the appropriate chemical depending on what it is, and it is disposed down the drain in accordance with the Massachusetts regulation. And we also have the on-site and off-site biological decontamination record keeping forms that are on site as well in binders. So we keep records of all the solid and liquid biological waste that is disposed of in the facility. Next slide, please. Here's a quick rundown of the permits that we have attained / that we are pursuing. Of course, we have the biosafety permit, which is what we are here today to advance. We have the flammable liquid storage permit that has been issued pending on the move-in date by the Somerville Fire Department. We have a microscope with a laser in it that we will have amended for Somerville as soon as we make the move. The same thing with the Schedule 6 Massachusetts Controlled Substances registration. That application is in the pipeline. And finally, we have an EPA ID number, which has been assigned by the Department of Environmental Protection quite recently. Next slide. And finally, here are some of the contracts we have in place with third parties. We have air balancing negative pressure done by Zone Mechanical. The certification of biosafety cabinets, as well as the certification of fume hoods, will be handled by Air Test. Biological and hazardous waste, the management of it on site, as well as the disposal, will be handled by Triumvirate Environmental. The fire extinguisher certification contract is still in progress, but we do have the lab coat laundry services performed by Cintas, pest control done by JP Pest Services, which the plan for which has been attached to the permit application as well. And plumbing backflow prevention will be done by North Shore Mechanical Contractors. Lincoln, which is the property management company that will be owning 100 Chestnut or managing 100 Chestnut, will be maintaining the water testing for the MWRA permit, as well as sprinkler system testing. And with that, I'll hand it over to Alix, who's going to talk about the protocol risk assessments. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. I'm here to talk about the protocol risk assessments. Next slide, please. So we have here 10 different protocols we had submitted when we were in Cambridge, so we're now transferring those over. The first three, propagation of wild type AD5, propagation of AAV vector cell lines, and the cloning of AAV cell lines, are all related to each other. This is all part of the process for us to make recombinant AAV. And these are all under risk group 2. Actually, yes, most of them are all risk group 2. Number 4 is the PBMC purification from whole human blood. We do this to screen for presence of DNA, RNA, and protein that has been delivered to human PBMCs. So this is, we're screening the blood. The blood has been screened by a third party. And this is in vitro work only, no in vivo work. Number 5 is the mouse and non-human primate tissue processing. Same thing here. This is only in-house. There's no in vivo work on site. This is similar in that we're also looking for DNA, RNA, and other proteins are expressed from delivery of AAV to mouse or non-human primate tissues. Number 6 is lentivirus protocol. Here we are using lentivirus to, we're looking to introduce a gene expression cassettes into the cell lines, up to delivering CRISPR reagents to common lab cell lines. For number 7, the yeast use, we're using it as a model system to either express and purify proteins or to construct libraries for peptide display and screening. And number 8, plasmid cloning. This is, oh, sorry. I think it's on my part. Plasmid cloning. This is all part of production of cisplasmids or triple-A plasmids, which we use as part of our AAV production to create cell lines to produce AAV. So this is all part of our development work. Number 9 is the wild-type simian adenovirus 13. This is to use as an alternative to wild-type adenovirus type 5. Again, as a helper virus for adenovirus for AAV production. And this is also done at bench scale. And number 10 is the CRISPR-based gene editing systems. We're doing this to perform gene editing in research and development for our gene therapies. And I just want to mention all this is bench scale, under 25 liters. Yes.
Okay, I have the question about the NHP tissue. What kind of monkey? What kind of tissue? From what kind of monkey is this? It's macaque versus what the monkey?
I believe it's a rhesus macaque. I believe I could look it up in detail in our protocol.
This is from rhesus macaques.
Yeah, it's okay. So how this tissue is tested?
Yeah, so we handle all the non-human primate tissue at the biosafety level 2 containment, but we do ensure we're sourcing from colony herpes B virus free colonies. So the colonies are being tested. We're making sure that those materials are safe prior to coming into our facility.
And I would just add that the necropsy and all of that is done by a research facility at the research facility where the monkeys are handled. And we receive that tissue here. So none of that work is being done on site. We are just processing the tissue once it's received.
Great question, Slavek. And if you have any other questions, feel free to email me or send them in the chat to me directly, and I can pass those on and we can connect. Okay, great. Thank you.
I believe that's it for this slide.
That's the end of our presentation. Thanks everyone who went through today. If there's any other questions, Colin, I'll hand it back to you.
Thank you all for presenting. I just had a couple initial questions. Would someone be able to describe the chain of incident reporting and how that ends up getting to the Somerville Biosafety Committee, the fire department, as well as emergency services for the city? Would anyone be able to enlighten us a little bit about that?
I can take that one. So EHS Insight is, like as JM mentioned, is our software system. So that is something all of our employees are trained on how to use. So, and encouraged to use as well to report any incidents or spills that would occur. So we get a automatic email notification anytime someone enters something into the system, whether it be an incident, or we also have modules for people proactively to report safety observations or hazards that they see. So, our hopes are the more safety observations we get, the more incidents we can prevent before they convert. And then, so based on that email notification, we start our investigation process. We have strict timelines in place, and we have an incident reporting document. So, we follow those guidelines of how we manage our investigations and where we submit any reports that need to be shared with, like you said, the Somerville Biosafety Committee if we had an exposure or an event that did occur. So that's where we capture all of those steps and information. But we do have a Viva document to reference.
Yeah, thank you for that answer, Alexa. I had another question. Would it be possible to clarify where the staff entrances are located? I know it was mentioned that there were a differentiation in access points for varying levels or jobs within the facility. Could we just clarify those real quick?
JM, can you take this one on? I think I know the answer, but I
Yes.
don't want to misspeak.
Yep, no problem. So the furthest to the left, as well as the middle of the three on the lower side towards the right, those locks are the main entrances. The one on the furthest left enters through our office, and the other three towards the right enter from the common hallway. So that middle one goes into a vestibule that then leads into the main corridor of the lab space, whereas the ones on either side of that are the mechanical room and then the shipping and receiving room, respectively. The access granted to the individual to get through those points is the same regardless. They will need all of the training that we went over, regardless of how they enter. The idea, though, will be that we will instruct all of the employees to enter through the areas with the vestibules so that they can properly gown before entering into any research areas.
Thank you. That's all the questions I had. Does anyone else have any questions? You can click the emote button, raise your hand, or put it in the chat. Okay. Seeing none, I will move to the next motion. And I wanted to thank you all for attending tonight and explaining a little bit about your application and your process. We're looking forward to having you on Somerville soon. And if any other questions come up, just feel free to send me an email. I'm happy to answer anything. Okay. Great. Oh, oops. I would now like to move to our next item, which is going to be a presentation from Bristol Myers Squibb on their proposed operation at 250 Water Street. Do I have a second? Second. Awesome. Excellent. So Sonia Butler and Giles Buckwalter are here representing Bristol Myers Squibb. Sonia, would you like me to make you presenter or
Yes, please.
Giles presenter? Okay, great.
Please.
You are officially a presenter. The floor is yours.
Okay, share. Okay, share. Okay, I don't see anything. Choose what you would like to share with the go to Microsoft Edge. There's nothing there. Share. Yeah.
Sonia, I
The
had
share.
to like,
Yeah.
if you go toggle up at the top to
Uh-huh.
window,
Uh-huh.
and then your windows pop up. So
Okay.
try to click up at the very top of it.
Okay, let's see. I see my presentation, but is the share button lit for me? Can I click on that? Is it clickable? I guess so.
It should
Yeah,
be. It looks like a
it
slideshow
is.
screen with a slash through it
Yeah.
right now.
Okay. Share. Select. Let's go to one. Okay. I see it. And can I just wipe the sweat off first? So good evening, everyone. Hopefully you can see my slides. I'm not familiar with this application either. My name is Sonia Butler, and I will be presenting for Bristol Myers Squibb as well as my colleague, uh, Jills Buckwalter. We are presenting on behalf of Bristol Myers Squibb at 250 Water Street. I myself am an EHS manager first, and then a biosafety officer, and Jills is a principal scientist first, as well as our IBC chair. Okay, so for our site, our largest two departments, the first one would be mechanisms of cancer resistance, and the second one is the chemistry department. So Emily, she is our vice president, and she does sit at our site. Michael Diker, he is our site director. Our lab space and lab support is 112,183 square feet. We have 510 BMS employees, 130 contractors with 10 departments. The contractors are majority JLL, and that is John Lang LaSalle, and they assist us with the building operations. And when I say building operations, they will help us with OMI, Stericycle, Millipore, Penny, Kevin Cox, Air Systems, Siemens, to give you a few examples. Here are our 10 departments: mechanisms of cancer resistance, chemistry, biologics, translational medicine, immunology, cardiovascular and fibrosis, pharmaceutical candidate optimization, proteomics, lead discovery optimization, neuroscience, and biotherapeutics. On our site, we do have an occupational health department. It is staffed with 2 nurses. They too provide medical surveillance, which would also include hepatitis vaccinations. Um, with that being said, we have a contract with Mount Auburn Hospital. They too have an occupational health department, and all of our employees are trained to see Mount Auburn Hospital in the event that our ARC Health department is closed for the evening. If there is an emergency and someone needs to see an CNR or ER or visit an ER, we recommend Mass General Hospital as it is the closest to us. With JLL, again, they are our maintenance and operations staff. We do have resident contractors on site, so they make up that 130 number. along with some other resident contractors. They are not BMS employees, but they do report to the site with a 40-hour work week. You see here some other examples include Allied Security, as well as Veolia, who is our waste vendor. With that being said, JLL would physically manage them while they are on site, but they do report up to Bristol Myers Squibb. The mission, our mission includes values, visions, and commitment. Bristol Myers Squibb is a global biopharma company firmly focused on its mission to discover, develop, and deliver innovative medicines to patients with serious diseases. Okay, so our proposed facility. So our laboratories again are located at 250 Water Street. The lab makes up floors 2 through 7. We do have a vivarium on the 5th floor, and that is managed by Charles River Laboratories. Housed in the vivarium, I'm told, will be only rodents, mice, and rats with a maximum capacity of 2,900. We did provide some documents earlier with the application. And so when we speak to biological safety, we're looking at facilities SOP multi-site E312, which contains all the procedures relevant to BMS research and use of rDNA and biological agents at the levels of containment in use at our facility. When we're looking at security, BMS does require badge access for laboratory entry, elevator, and CRL vivarium. Our biosecurity plan refers to institutional and personal security measures designed to prevent the loss, theft, misuse, diversion, or intentional release of pathogens and toxins. Security measures are in place and documented in a written biosecurity plan, and it is part of our overall security facilities plan. BMS badge access is granted only upon completion of the required training, which consists of bloodborne pathogens and biosafety. And then the second module is lab standard and hazardous waste. EHS person does facilitate that, and that is a live training. For biosafety designations, we're looking at 1 through 2 enhanced. And the tool that we use to manage and conduct a risk assessment is the BAR, Biological Assessment of Risk form, and that process is a formal tool that is used to complete our risk assessment. And so with that risk assessment, we also have an effective program established to register, document, and approve the biological agents and activities on site. Using the BAR process, I, the biosafety officer, will review the forms and refer any projects or experiments that require additional review to our biosafety committee. We also have a corporate biosafety officer who is a member of our IBC, and when things need to be escalated, we have a mechanism in place to do that. With that being said, biological agent controls are selected to control the hazard identified by the risk assessment following a hierarchical approach. Adoption of control measures that eliminate the hazardous biological agent are favored over engineering controls and safeguards. These controls come through various sources like work practices and laboratory procedures. And this is the least favored, but with that being said, we have some examples of each level of the hierarchy. The first one being elimination. We want to minimize the risk by substitution. For example, replacing a hazardous biological agent with something less hazardous. An example can be using E. coli K12 derivative or a vaccine strain of an agent. Next is engineering controls. We have controls in place for the risk at the source by using control measures. An example would be the biological safety cabinet. We have 152 on site. That will be facilitated by air gas systems, and that would be a PM that JLL would manage for us. When work does produce an aerosol, we require use of biological safety cabinet, and then engineerings are implemented together with adherence to principles of good microbiological practices, for example, good aseptic techniques. And then lastly, work practices like laboratory procedures, minimizing risk through an effective PPE and chemical hygiene plan. Okay. Next, we're going to take a look at our lab space. Within a lab this large, obviously, signage and labels are very important. I'll speak to some of the signage and labels as you see these bullets here. That's what I'm referring to. So again, the laboratory exists through floors 2 through 7. Each requires PPE consisting of a lab coat. So upon entry into the lab, you must don a lab coat and safety glasses. We are all given 3 lab coats. And once your lab coat becomes soiled, you will place it in the laundry bin, which will go out on, let's just say, example, a Tuesday and return the following Tuesday. So it's up to each research individual how they manage their lab coats, but they should never be without a lab coat. And the food and drink are never allowed in any of our laboratory spaces. And then for our researchers, we advise them to be aware of the safety equipment like the fire extinguisher locations, emergency exits, eye wash stations, emergency shower stations. Posted signage also exists throughout the lab space, so we ask that they follow the sign restrictions and instructions. Our entire laboratory space is considered a biosafety level 2 space unless otherwise posted. And then, as you can imagine, hazardous materials, so chemicals are utilized in our lab for various purposes. So we ask the researchers to read the safety data sheets for any chemical that they are working with as part of their hazard communication. Next, the Massachusetts Water Regulatory Authority has requirements for liquids that cannot be disposed of down the sink. So we ask our researchers to adhere to the signage at the sink that states what liquids cannot be disposed of down the drains in our laboratories. Finally, latex-free area. We do have a researcher that has a latex allergen, and that primarily exists on the 7th floor. What we've done at our previous site is signages up to indicate that there's a latex-free area. And so when you walk into our laboratory space, we have POUs, we call them point of use stations. These are areas where people are able to gather the supplies that they need to conduct their research. And we will have one tagged out as a latex free area. And then the remaining items that one may need can be found at another point of use station. Okay. Here is an example of our departments in the summary breakdown of our lab space. I did say that we had 10 departments, and so there are some additional departments listed here that make up a larger department. This accounts for
Sonia, sorry to
bodies.
interrupt. Would you be able
Yep,
to full screen that presentation? Maybe present the slideshow.
sure.
The writing's super small. Thank you.
Okay, sorry about that.
No problem.
Let's see here. Does that help at all?
There is a zoom function on GoTo.
Can you see that better for that particular slide?
Yeah, better.
Okay. So I think out of all the slides that I have, that one has the smallest font. So we have lab-facing employees. Those are our researchers, and you see the count and how we came up with our number. And then the square footage for lab and lab services. Okay, I've got to make it smaller to, I think, toggle through. Okay, so with that being said, next I'm going to talk about, what is this? I can't see what slide I'm on. Biohazard waste. So with that being said, here are some examples of the various waste containers that we have available for our researchers in the laboratory. Obviously the sharps container, and then the biohazard waste bin. We use facilities SOP MSE, multi-site 325. This is for general waste, specifically section 11. It speaks to medical waste, and we refer to that as biohazard waste. So biohazard waste is regulated on a state-by-state basis and may include the following types of waste. This includes cultures and stocks, pathological waste, human blood and blood products, needles, syringes, and animal waste, to name a few. Our biohazard waste streams must be disposed of in accordance with the applicable BMS directives and applicable local, state, and federal regulations. Our general procedure requires that all biohazard waste be segregated into separate containers, as you see here, and these separate waste streams include sharps, liquid waste, and solid and other waste. BMS does dispose of most of its solid waste in the biohazard bins in the laboratories, and we overclassify our medical waste to prevent items being placed into the municipal solid waste streams. This includes unused or uncontaminated laboratory items such as culture dishes, flasks or tubes, as well as PPE, gloves, disposable lab coats, etc. Okay, so I'm going to ask my colleague Jills, who is principal scientist at our site and also the IBC chair, to speak to this slide.
Thank you, Sonia. Thank you. So with this slide, I'm going to go briefly over risk assessments. And I would like to start by saying that the BMS laboratory in Somerville is an R&D site. It is a fully integrated drug discovery site for preclinical development of molecules to treat cancers, autoimmune and inflammatory diseases, and neurodegenerative disorders. So those are three disease areas we're interested in this site. And we have all the support functions to transfer drug candidates to clinical development, such as chemistry, protein synthesis, proteomics, bioinformatics, just to name a few. So for all our programs, we are using biological samples, such as recombinant DNA, human or animal cells, tissue, blood, lentivirus as transduction tools, non-human primate tissues or cells. So we are abiding by the guidelines of our SOPs that are listed here on the slide when it comes to biological safety and risk assessment. This risk assessment is focused on risk group 2 agents. So those are agents that are associated with human disease and rarely serious, and for which preventive or therapeutic interventions are often available. These agents represent a moderate risk to an individual, but low risk to the community. And those agents are listed there. So we have bacteria, viruses, AAV, lentiviruses, recombinant DNA, microbial toxins, human or non-human primate cells, blood or blood products. So those are the main discussion topics of our biological assessment of risk, or BARS, that Sonia described earlier. We have about 20 active BARS at the moment. And for the sake of time, I'm not going to list them all, but we're happy to provide a list if needed, but I can give you a few examples. We have BARs related to drug discovery programs, such as, for example, a bar on kinase inhibitor development, a bar of B-cell depletion strategy. We do have bars related to lab procedures. An example of that would be, for example, the use of human and non-human blood products for cell cultures. We have bars related to department protocols, for example, a bar on sample preparation analysis for proteomics. So again, those are just a few examples. And those bars are generated by our scientists using a bar repository platform with a very exhaustive questionnaire. And they are revised annually by our scientists. This is an automated platform that prompts them to edit and revise the bars, and are reviewed by our internal IBC committee. So I will now hand it over to Sonia for the continuation of the presentation.
Thank you, Jules. Okay, and so as it relates to training, we're looking at facilities SOP multi-site E312, biological safety, section 37. We have an initial onboarding training, which includes the following: information related to exposure and associated risks, precautions to be taken to minimize exposure, risk, engineering controls available to use, PPE, personal protective equipment, requirements, biosecurity concern, signage and labeling requirements, exposure, incident monitoring, medical monitoring, and emergency procedures. After you've completed your initial onboarding, there is a requirement for the annual refresher training. So you will then repeat this training. The first time you take the training, it is live and in person. And then the annual refresher training comes to you through an electronic portal called Success Factors. Upon completion of each training, you do receive a training certificate. With that being said, I think the last question was related in this section to who is in charge of the training. So Global obviously is in charge of it, but from a site perspective, we facilitate it. Myself, EHS manager, reporting to the Associate Director, Environmental Health and Safety, Ron Ameling. So permits and timelines. Our Massachusetts Water Resource Authority permit is currently in place. We do have a radiation safety permit currently in place. Our biosafety is submitted and pending. Our flammable storage and cryogenic gas is submitted and pending. And then we are waiting on our certificate of inspection for our 4 assembly areas, which is submitted and pending. Okay. So contracts in place. Our sharps are handled by Stericycle. Our pest control is with Waltham Pest, but I believe it is going to change at some point to Rentokil. Plumbing and backflow prevention. We will work with Canistraro on backflow maintenance and plumbing. Lab coat laundry is with UniFirst. Water testing for MWRA is done by Alpha Analytical for testing, and then OMI, which stands for Operation and Maintenance Incorporated. Sprinkling testing is done by Canistraro as well. Hazardous waste, Veolia. A team of Veolia folks will sit in our building Monday through Friday. Our pH neutralization system uh, samples are managed by OMI. Our biosafety certifications, I believe we have 152, are with Air Systems Technology, and will need to be recertified next May and June. Our air balancing and negative pressure in our BSL2 spaces, that contract is with Kevin Cox. The facility backflow prevention will be managed by the landlord and is a lease facility from Divco West. Thank you. And what questions do you have for us?
And thank you, Sonia and Giles. Thank you both very much for that. A couple of questions that came to mind. With a facility this large, 7 floors, is there a designated biosafety officer for each floor, or are you managing that? Is there a staff that works underneath you and monitoring all of this and ensuring that incident reports are being filed and everything's being kept track of?
So our incident reporting system is called Safe IAM, and we folks are trained to utilize this system in the event of an incident or a near miss. With that being said, folks are trained to report incidents. We are very transparent here. I am the only biosafety officer for the site. However, we do have safety reps, I'll call them, or ambassadors. So folks who assist our safety committee members are made up of representatives from all of our respective departments. And so when an incident does happen, it does get reported. Within the laboratory space, for chemical spills, we have the Alertus system. And so if someone is involved in a chemical spill that is larger than 500 mLs, they push this red button that is connected directly to our GROC. The GROC are the folks who manage our site 24/7, 365. Those are our security folks. And that sends a message directly to them to communicate a spill. So we have a very robust plan, and folks are trained to be transparent and report incidents. With the space being so large, there are a number of people in there, and with that being said, there are a lot of eyes in the laboratory as well as security monitoring the space.
Last question. I was wondering if your site has applied for an EPA ID as to be designated as a small or large quantity generator. I
We
was
would be a
wondering
large
if
quantity. Yeah, we'd be
large
a large
quantity.
quantity
Has
generator.
that been applied for? It wasn't on the
Yes,
permit.
and received.
Okay, great, good to know. Does anyone else have any other questions? Feel free to put them in the chat or raise your hand. Oh, Slavek, go ahead.
Yeah, same question with NHP, that the tissue is tested against the herpes B virus.
So yeah, we do not have any NHPs on site, any live monkeys. So we're receiving potential tissues for both cynomolgus mongoose and rhesus monkeys.
Okay.
And those tissues are blood or blood products and tissues, fixed tissues or tissue lysates. So the monkeys originate from our BMS internal colony at a different site, and the health status of those monkeys are monitored by our vet science team. And they also sometimes originate from CROs, and there is also health monitoring from the CRO.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. And I saw just on the one slide, or even this slide, is the viruses. Viruses, you say that is the only AAV and antiviral vector, yes?
That's correct. That's correct.
Okay, and what are the microbial toxins?
So we're mostly using toxins for our immunology, immune cell stimulation assays. Those are LPS, and we also have a bar to use staph enterotoxin B for T cell stimulation.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone has the access to the toxin or no? It's just like controlled substance?
So the SEB, the staff enterotoxin B, is a select agent. So we have a very limited amount on site, and it's in a log box, and we have an inventory. And the LPS is a pretty benign toxin that's used widely in our cell-based assays.
And speaking about the radiation, because I see the work with you work with isotopes, yes? Any kind of isotope. What is the kind of isotopes? Is it just phosphate, like P32, or is another?
Tritium and P32.
No,
Let me see if there's a slide that speaks to that.
that's okay. Mostly surface.
Oh,
Yeah. Okay.
yeah.
Thank you.
Let's see. Oh, the permits.
Oh yeah, the radiation.
Great. So Sonia, were you going to, expand on the, or was that the answer? Was it answered? Apologies, I might have cut out.
Yeah, it was answered, but I
Okay,
don't.
all right.
It was in regards to radiation.
Yeah,
What?
excellent.
Yeah, what isotopes were being used? Tritium,
Yeah,
P32.
great.
Very
This is
small
like
amounts.
yeah, the microcurie
Yeah,
level. Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
very
Thank you.
small. Yeah,
Yep.
we
Good.
don't even have any on site at this time.
Okay, good to know.
Mhm.
Does anyone else have any other questions? Feel free to raise your hand, digitally or physically, whichever comes first. Great. Great. Well, thank you, Sonia. Thank you, guys, for taking the time to present BMS's work in Somerville. Looking forward to hearing from you in the future and seeing the great work that you're going to be conducting here in the city. So thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
I don't know how to stop sharing. This screen is large.
Okay.
Okay.
Let's see.
I don't want to push escape.
Yeah, try that.
Okay, I did, and let's just
Okay,
see where
it looks
we
like
can.
you're out. I can see everybody, and I don't see your
Okay.
screen anymore. So I think you're all
Thank
set.
you.
Thanks, Sonia.
Okay, thank you. Am I supposed to remove myself or just hang out?
You can stay if you would like.
Okay, thank you.
Great. So thank you to all our presenters. That concludes item number 3 for this evening. I would like to move to item number 4, the approval of renewal applications. Can I get a second? Awesome. Head nods, count. Excellent. So during the previous meeting, just so everyone knows, we were unable to meet quorum due to a committee member having a conflict that was a little obscure that we didn't know about at the time, so they had to abstain. So now we are able to make quorum. Rachel, thank you for joining us and joining the committee. Previously, we had agreed that the renewals were complete and we were moving for approval, but like I said, we were unable to vote. So I would like to move to vote on item number 4, subsections A through D in one singular vote. Can I get a second?
Second.
Excellent. All right. Deputy Chief Hallahan.
Yes,
Uh,
approved.
Karen Carroll.
Yes, approved.
All right. Rachel Ned Carney.
Yes.
And then myself, yes. That is approved. Those applications are deemed complete and approved. I will be in contact with the applicants within the next week as to receiving their permit, as well as any additional instructions or clarifications. So thank you all for that. That will be recorded on our minutes. Now I'd like to move to the next item, voting for the completion and potential approval. If there aren't any additional questions, item number 5. Could I get a second? Excellent. Adnan's work. Based on the applications we received for both Ultragenyx and Bristol Myers Squibb, both were deemed sufficient, with Bristol Myers Squibb just missing their pest control service report and plan, which they have subsequently provided. So thank you, Sonia, for doing that. All items are present in both applications. Both meet the standards for what we're looking for. And based on the presentations that we received tonight, everything appears to be being applied as we'd like to see it. So I'd like not only to move to vote for completion, but also approval simultaneously. Could I get a second? Great. So we will take vote now. Alex Vera?
I'm afraid I'm going to have to abstain again.
Abstain. Karen Carroll?
Yes, approved.
Deputy Chief Hallahan?
Yes, approved.
And Rachel Ned Carney?
Yes.
Excellent. And myself? Yes. So that is deemed complete and approved. Again, I will be in touch with receiving your permit as well as any additional clarifying questions as to how it applies. So now I'd like to move to item number 6, but I actually want to vote or move to adjourn and table item number 6. I want to be cognizant of everyone's time. We all could use some dinner tonight. And this next item, which is consider edits to section 5-59 of the Somerville Biosafety Ordinance, is still very complicated and up in the air, and I haven't received feedback from staff on that. So second to tabling item number 6.
I'll second that one.
Excellent. So now I'd like to move to adjourn. Second. And vote. Karen Carroll. Deputy Chief Hallahan.
Yes.
Rachel Ned Carney.
Yes.
Alex Vera.
Yes.
And myself, yes. Again, I wanted to thank everyone for attending tonight. I really appreciated all the presentations and the patience with our applicants as we continue to bolster the Biosafety Committee and clarify things in terms of staff roles as well as policies and procedures. So if you have any additional questions, feel free to email me. I'm happy to answer anything or forward anything on. Great. Excellent.
Thanks, Colin.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everyone.
Thank you, Colin. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Have a good night.